Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mindy Parrott with South Florida Water Management District. I am the district's project manager for the Western Everglades Restoration Project. We're going to give you an update today on the project and hopefully answer some of the questions you may have about it. I'm going to give just a couple more seconds because I see that we still have some more people joining in the attendees. So stay tuned. All right. Well, let's get started. Before we proceed with the presentations, I'd like to open it up to Lieutenant Colonel Todd Polk, who's joined us today from the Army Corps of Engineers to give a few opening remarks. So, sir, if you're there, you might need to unmute yourself by.
How about now?
There. Woo.
Some feedback there. How about now? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, good. Loud and clear.
All right, great. Hey, let me turn down my other one here. Got like 3 methods going on here. Yeah, hey, so on behalf of the Army Corps of Engineers, Jacksonville District, and on behalf of Colonel Kelly, our commander, I just wanted to welcome everyone here to this virtual WERP project update. And thank you so much for joining us today. Today our team is going to provide an update on Western Everglades Restoration Project and take some public comments. And I want to thank you all for your input to this project. We know how valuable it is, and we value your feedback, and how important it is for you to share all your local knowledge and concerns for our consideration. I think we all look forward to being able to meet again in Big Cypress. I know I certainly do, and I've had a few chances to get down there relatively recently and enjoy every chance I can. One of the things that was brought up during one of our past meetings was the importance for incorporating South Florida Water Management District survey data into the real estate analysis. And we'll discuss that today. You're going to see some great videos and some things on that. And that's just one example of why having y'all involved in this process is so important to the success of this project. We appreciate your ongoing engagement again for the Western Everglades project, and I'm glad y'all are here today. And with that, I will now turn this over to South Florida Water Management District's Bureau Chief for Ecosystems Restoration Planning, Ms. Jennifer Leeds.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Polk. My name's Jennifer Leeds. I'm the Bureau Chief for the South Florida Water Management District and the Ecosystem Restoration Planning Group. And I just wanted to take just a minute to say that, we know it's been a while since we have checked in with everyone. I think it's been about a year, over a year, since we were down there at Big Cypress and we had a meeting, had a very good meeting. Everyone was really well engaged. And so we really wanted to take the time to check in, give everyone an update on where the project is at. But also, we wanted to be able to say on behalf of the team that we wanted to say thank you to all the landowners and all the people in Big Cypress National Preserve and along Tamiami Trail that allowed our survey team access to your property to collect this information. We do really appreciate that, having you engaged, hearing your feedback, and also hearing your knowledge of on the ground and what's going on out there in Big Cypress is invaluable to our team and to our project. So I really wanted to just say thank you to everyone for allowing that. And I also wanted to say thank you to Mike Elvenbein. He was very instrumental in helping us reach out to everyone and get the word out for that. And so we really appreciate his help in his coordination on that. And I'd also like to echo what Lieutenant Colonel Polk said is, next time that we give a project update, we're really looking forward to coming down and being there in person. And we also know that your time is very important. And so we appreciate you taking your precious time to meet with us. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mindy and let the team give you guys an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Lieutenant Colonel Polk. Appreciate those opening remarks. So let me go over the agenda a little bit. I'm going to give an overview, a high-level overview of the WERP project, because we know it's been a while since we've talked to you about the project, and we probably have some people who aren't familiar with WERP on the line. And then after that, Steve Basin with the Army Corps of Engineers is going to give an update on the status of the feasibility study and what the next steps are. Then Michael O'Brien with our survey section will give a really cool overview of the survey work that we did last summer. And then Madahel Ansar from our applied hydraulics section will talk about some of the things that have been going on down at L28 South and Tamiami Trail area. And then we'll take public comment at the end of the meeting. But first, let's talk about some Zoom housekeeping. So everyone's muted until the public comment period, but we are going to take questions in the Q&A feature, which is in the Zoom toolbar. The WERP team members and panelists will be able to answer your questions directly in that Q&A feature. It's kind of like a chat. If there are questions that aren't answered, we'll read those aloud and try to address them after each presentation. Or you could hold your question or comment till the public comment period, and then you'll have to take the appropriate action to raise your hand, which would be using the raise hand feature in the Zoom toolbar. Or if you called in, *9 would raise your hand. So I'll remind you about these steps when we get there. So let's get started. So this will be a high-level overview of the WERP project and what WERP is all about. The Western Everglades Restoration Project is part of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. It's a feasibility study. The results of this effort will be an integrated project implementation report and environmental impact statement. It's led by the Corps of Engineers with South Florida Water Management District as the local sponsor. To implement the project will require authorization by Congress and then funding of the project features as well. So the WERP study area on the left is outlined in black, and it shows the area, the large area that the study has been looking at since it started in 2016. The SERP projects in general look at the features of this Central and Southern Florida project and how those features can be altered or updated to reduce some of the negative impacts they've had to the Everglades and other natural areas. The main components of the CNSF in this area are the L28 canals. There's the interceptor. I'll point it out for you. So here's I-75 reference. This is the interceptor canal, the L28 interceptor canal. Here's the L28, also known as the L28 North. And then the L28 South is down here. These canals and levees are causing over drainage, poor water quality, and compartmentalization in the Western Everglades. But meanwhile, the water levels in Southern Conservation Area 3A are at times too high. So these physical and ecological challenges that we see from these features are divided habitat, altered flow patterns, loss of native plants and animals, over drainage, increased wildfires, poor water quality, and impacts to traditional practices and to recreational uses. So one of the easiest, obvious of these ecological challenges to point out is the halo area at the L28 triangle. So what we call the L28 triangle is where these two canals and levees almost come together to create a triangle with this I-75. And where the L28 interceptor canal ends, you can see this bright green area, and that area is a very dense overgrowth of cattail. And so on the right here, you can see what that looks like from the helicopter view. So WERP's objectives are to try to address some of these challenges and restore the quality, quantity, timing, and distribution of water. And so on the right, you can kind of see, I've altered this photo a little bit to increase the contrast, but you can see where the sloughs naturally flow and how some of these features are blocking that natural flow that you can see outlined by the vegetation. So alternative HR is depicted on the left. I know you can't pick out all the details on this map on a slide. So if you haven't received this map in the meeting invite or through email and you'd like a copy of it, please contact me and I'll be happy to send it to you. The alternative HR is the result of evaluation of plans since 2016 using hydrologic and ecological modeling tools. And this is the plan that's moving forward. As a brief overview, the plan has 2 stormwater treatment areas. Those are these yellow blobs that you might be able to see on the plan on the left. There's a flowway from this STA to the Kissimmee Valley Slough. There's filling of about 9 miles of the canals in the triangle area that I spoke about earlier. There's vegetation restoration in those halo areas. There's one here and there's also one by S140. There's removal of the tieback levee, filling of about 6 miles of the L28 South, construction of 3 gated culverts between Conservation Area 3A and Big Cypress National Preserve, and additional culverts under Tamiami Trail, Loop Road, and 11 Mile Road. So what do we get with all these features? So in the next few slides, I'm going to give just some highlights of the project benefits that we've seen through the modeling tools. And I'm sure that in future meetings, we'll go into this in a bit more depth. So we see in the modeling reduction in conditions that lead to damaging fires, and that is through extension or restoration of hydro periods. On this diagram on the left, kind of hard to see, but this is where the triangle would be. And this is the canal alongside Tamiami Trail. So you can see with the alterations and features that I described before, we have increased hydro periods, which is number of days of water above ground, and those are shown in blue or purple colors. In green, generally is very little change, and yellow colors are a bit drier. So you can see there's a little bit of drier area here and a little wetter area here, or actually wetter for longer and not quite as long in the yellow. On the right, we can see how the project might restore flow patterns. These are very wet conditions. So it mimics a very, very wet year. And the reason we show wet year is because you can see the most contrast in the flow arrows. So the blue, the light blue, and the dark blue arrows are more flow, while red and orange would be low or little flow. And you can see that we're starting to get that S curve pattern back through Mullet Slough and into Big Cypress. So with these improved hydrologic conditions, we have improved connectivity and habitat conditions. So other ways we will see project benefits are through improved water quality. with the STAs that will be constructed and operated. And just by the physical act of filling in canals, this is an example from Picayune Strand. You can see that over time, the canal will kind of fade into the ecosystem and hopefully one day be indistinguishable. So we also use ecological tools to look at project benefits. And I know that I'm not going to do this much justice, but I did want to point out some of the habitat benefits that we see for a few of the key species in the area. So on the left, we have the model area is shown in yellow, or I'm sorry, is outlined in red. And so this, for reference, would be the L28 triangle area, and this would be Tamiami Trail. And so in this set of models, the green is an improvement, yellow is basically staying the same, and orange would be a slightly unfavorable for that species. So for alligator, in this comparison of alt HR to the future without alt HR, we're seeing improvements for alligator. Similarly, on the right, we see similar a pattern, although not as pronounced, for wood storks. But you'll note that we do have some area of orange, which is slightly less favorable, but that is because the WERP features actually do a little bit of drying in this area, which is favorable for this species, the Cape Sable seaside sparrow. So on this map, this is Tamiami Trail up here, and that's where 40 Mile Bend starts. And so in that same area, we see a positive green for this species. So with all of these benefits, we have to also look at what those changes do to the built environment. So all CERT projects have to comply with the savings clause. And in short, what that means is that the CERT project can't cause a reduction in level of service for flood protection in existence at the date of enactment. It also addresses water supply. But the project can incorporate mitigative measures to address flood protection, which might be additional features like the additional culverts that were added to Loop Road and Tamiami Trail. We might look at flowage easements where we need to flow water over private lands. There might be a need for raising structures or other measures. So this requires a technical comparison of predicted water levels with existing water levels and elevations of structures and topography. And so last year, what we did was we looked at the areas of the largest changes in groundwater or surface water, and we came up with these 4 zones. And that is where the district surveyed parcels. And so Michael O'Brien will go into a little bit more about that activity, but I wanted you to know why we looked in certain areas and how that was decided. So the Army Corps will be doing a detailed real estate and savings clause analysis, and I'm sure Steve will talk about that in his presentation. So with that, I will take questions if we have some that need to be answered. There's a
Hi, Mindy.
Yeah.
Hi, there's just one unanswered question at the moment from Frank Carrieri, asking how many people are on the call who are landowners. I don't know that we can determine that from the list we have, but that's the question.
Okay. I think all we can do is I think you can see the list of the attendees. Is that correct, Devon? But other than, you know, how they chose to identify themselves when they logged on, I don't think we have any way to tell you how many on the call are landowners. So I apologize, Frank, but I don't think we can answer. I don't think we can answer that question.
All right, then there was, I think Jen Leeds is trying to address that issue with that individuals are not able to see the participant list. And I think she's directed a question to Devon on that to try to correct that.
Okay.
So hopefully that'll be addressed shortly. Also, we have one other question that's open right now from an M. Taylor. It says, where are the flowage easements most likely?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. We don't know yet. So once we have an analysis completed, once the Corps completes that analysis, then we'll look at where that might be needed.
Thank you. And I think those are all the open questions I have at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, one more question popped up from a Frank, and I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Frank Carrieri. How much of the project will affect the land west of Turner River Road?
Thank you, Frank, for your question. Let me see if I can go back to something I can point to. So I am not exactly sure where Turner River Road is, but I believe it is west of the end of Loop Road. So where Loop Road, the western part of Loop Road connects with a US 41 or Tamiami Trail. So I don't believe we are seeing any effects that much farther west than this. Does that answer your question, Frank?
He says yes. And then I have another question from a David McDonald. How will this address flows in the stair steps? And are there any breeding pairs of sparrows in the sparrow area?
Thank you for your question, David. I unfortunately can't answer that question, but we will take that down so that we make sure we address it in our next meeting.
Thank you, Mindy. I've got another one from a Richard Martinez. What will be the impact to the Bear Island unit and the northern border of Big Cypress?
All right, thank you for your question. Let me go back up. Apologize here. There we go. So I believe the Bear Island area is pretty far west as well. So I can't say for sure without exactly a location that you're thinking of. However, most of the effects that we see are, excuse me, are along the eastern parts of Big Cypress. They line up pretty well with the hydro period map here. So this is north of I-75 and west of the Interceptor Canal. Are there any additional questions, Jennifer?
I think that is it. I do have a response from Devon on the participant and attendees list. He was double checking with Zoom to see if it's something that we can provide. It appears that we can only have it for the panelists right now, but he is
Okay.
going to look into that.
Okay, well, for everyone's benefit right now, I have 101 attendees and 8 panelists.
Okay. Oh, and sorry, Richard Martinez has a follow-up question. So that he says, so the biggest impact will be in the addition unit, is the question.
Well, I won't, excuse me, I wouldn't characterize it as impacts. I would just characterize it as changes. And yes, this being the addition area to the preserve, that's one of the areas where we see changes from the project, but not the only one.
Okay. And I have a couple more questions that have popped up from Julio Herrera. If water levels change, is the raising of land and structures part of the flow plan?
So, excuse me. So once the real estate analysis is complete, then we'll have to look at if and where we see impacts that would require a mitigative measure.
Okay. And then I have a suggestion going forward from a Tom Forsyth, saying that it may be helpful moving forward to superimpose the BCNP boundary onto these maps so that people can see the data in relation to the area of concern.
Thank you, Tom.
Then I have a question. I've got 2 more questions. One is from Robert Wiley. For areas on the L28 interceptor where levees are being removed, how do the property owners in the Looneyville area have ingress and egress since their main access roads are along the levees?
Thank you, Mr. Wiley, for the question. This is an issue that we're aware of, and we will continue to look at it as we move forward with the analysis required for the project. But I don't have an answer for you today.
All right, I have a question from Zach Mackay. When is the work projected to start of removal of the L28 levee?
So none of the project's features can start at this point. We don't have a schedule for anything. We're going to need to complete the feasibility study first before we can look at a schedule of when that type of work would start. So at this point, I need to move on to the next speaker, will be Steve Basin with the Army Corps of Engineers. And he can talk more about the status of the study and what happens next. Take it away, Steve.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'd also like to share my appreciation to everybody for their patience in working through this challenging format here that we are trying to present this very important information. And we know, we all realize how important this is to you. And so we do ask that you continue to be patient. We'll certainly answer all of your questions as best as possible. I've had the privilege of being able to go out there a couple of times to see the beautiful landscape and to go out on the airboats and to visit some of the camps and to understand why that this area is so important to you. So we do realize that it's very important. And if you could go to the next slide here. We'll try to get to some of those questions. So currently, we do have an exception. We've requested a second 3x3 smart planning study exception for additional time and budget to complete the study. It is currently with our headquarters. That was with Major General Graham, who will endorse our waiver. We have had some communications with him earlier this week with Colonel Kelly. General Graham is in favor of endorsing it, so once it gets to his desks, we feel pretty strongly he'll sign that and transmit that over to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for review and approval. That will be the last stop. Once that request makes it to the ASA or the Assistant Secretary of the Army, then that's where it will be approved. So we're optimistic it'll be approved here in early June. Unfortunately, though, we did have to suspend our progress back in December because of we've exhausted our first exception budget. So once we do get approval, assuming it's in June, that would put us back on track to reach a tentatively selected plan in September of 2021. That is that's the next milestone there. And then a draft report, which would come out to the public in October of 2021 for review and comment. And then on to the latter milestones, the agency decision milestone in January of 22, a final report in May of 2022, and then the final document, which would be a report that's signed by the Chief of Engineers for the Corps of Engineers in September of 2022. And at that point, that's when it gets transmitted to Congress for authorization. So if we could go to the next slide. And again, I guess we do understand the importance of this real estate analysis. I know Mindy kind of mentioned some of the survey work that they've done out there. We certainly appreciate all of your cooperation. It is important that we get this right. It's not something that we're doing as business as usual. The other thing that, like the survey here, which is not typically something that we do at this feasibility level study. One of the other things that we are doing is we have applied for a waiver to the real estate policy, which would allow us to pursue the minimum real estate interest necessary. And in this case, we would be pursuing a flowage easement to impacted properties. So if, and that's a big if because we haven't completed the real estate analysis, if there are any properties that are or will be impacted, then that's where the real estate policy waiver would come into effect, which would allow us to pursue a flowage easement for those impacts. So with the survey data that we have received that we've received from South Florida, once we get the waiver approved or the exception approved for additional time and money, we will complete the real estate analysis. That's our first order of business, and that's estimated to take around 3 to 4 months. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take that survey data that we've got some survey data for some actual structures out there. So we'll certainly use that survey data to complete the analysis for those structures. And then for the structures where we do not have site-specific topographic information, we will compare that to our LiDAR data and apply a correction if necessary. And we'll apply that to the structures that do not have site-specific topographic information to complete our real estate analysis for all of the structures within the project footprint. So I know that's kind of a lot. Let's see. So the next slide, if we go, then I think the next slide is just questions. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay. So, so again, flowage easements would only be requested in the event that projects or parcels, parcels and structures are impacted. So if there's not any impacts to the structure, then we will not be pursuing any flowage easements on those parcels. So I did kind of see a lot of questions roll through. I guess if we want to start taking the questions.
We don't have any additional new questions that have come through yet, so we'll give it a minute.
And then just once we do complete the real estate analysis, like I said, in around approximately 3 to 4 months, we will be presenting that information to everyone, to the sponsor, to the stakeholders, and certainly to all of the Gladesmen and landowners out there. And hopefully by that time, we will be able to meet in person to share this information with you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of new questions. I've got the first one from Jeff W. What exactly is a flow easement?
Okay, a flowage easement is basically allowing us permission to flow water across the property at a certain depth, or in a certain a certain depth and a certain frequency, duration.
Okay, thank you. Then we have one from a Mike Elfenbahn. I'm probably butchering the name.
Mike Elfenbein, that's correct. You're right.
Thank you. Where can we see the results of ground truth elevation and LiDAR results in comparison to each other?
That's a good question, Michael. I don't know, would the next presenter be able to answer that question, Mindy? What do you think? Or would that be something that Don would have to share?
So I think Michael will be talking about the results we had from the ground truth and surveying that was performed. I guess I think what Mike's getting at might be more about the real estate analysis and comparison of elevations that you guys
Okay, so
doing.
Mr. Elfenbein, if you're referring to like what we're going to use to complete our real estate analysis, that would be in 3 to 4 months. If you just mean that you want the actual survey data, then that's probably something that we could share, I would think, relatively soon, if not. And I guess the next we could ask that next presenter that same question, as if they could, if we could provide that information to you.
Yeah, well, unless Michael wants to pipe in and answer that now. Michael O'Brien, you have thoughts on how we might share?
This is Michael O'Brien. Yes, we do have the reports, extensive reports, surveys out there in a PDF format. We can provide it to whomever through Melinda. We do have some limitations, though, in the areas where the tribal areas were about providing some of that information. But in the camps area and up by the sanctuary, we have PDF informative reports and associated data available through Melinda.
Thank you, Michael.
Are you ready for some more questions?
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay. Next one is from M. Taylor. Elevating existing structures was mentioned previously in this presentation. how do you propose getting around the strict prohibition, local, state, and federal, against this type of work to structures currently existing within the WERP footprint?
That's a very good question. We've talked about that a little bit. We don't know how we would propose raising structures in the event that that is a feasible mitigation measure. Something we'll certainly need to discuss with the county and whoever else is regulating that elevation of the structure, any kind of changes to the structure. And I believe it is with the county, in particular Collier County, that if the structures are raised, that they need to kind of meet other minimum requirements. So we haven't crossed that bridge yet. Our first order of business will be to determine what properties are impacted, if any, I guess, and then we will assess what options do we have. Is it just a flowage easement, or do we need to raise the structure? If so, how can we go about doing something like that? So I'm sorry I don't have more of an answer for you there, M. Taylor. I won't say Mr. or Mrs., but I'll just say M. Taylor.
All right, got some more questions from Gary Ritter. Would a flowage easement represent the entire property or only part of the property where water is being designed to move across the property?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think I want to say just the impacted property. So if it doesn't flow across, I mean, I'm assuming maybe he's got some large parcels where it would need to flow over the entire 10 acres or something like that. No, I would think it would be more or less site specific, but I will confirm with my Office of Counsel, and we can get back with you on that. But I would say most likely just the area that's being impacted, not like if you have a large area like 10 acres, like I said, it wouldn't be for the full 10 acres, no.
Thank you. The next question is from Robert Wiley. With the surveying that has been done and the modeling compared to the surveyed elevation, how many structures, houses, and roads are proposed to be inundated or required to be elevated? And who will be responsible to address FEMA floodplain impacts as a result of the implementation of the preferred alternative?
Okay, so first of all, we don't know if any properties or any structures are going to be impacted. That's that's our first order of business. FEMA floodplain impacts as a result of the implementation. I'm not sure. Mr. Wiley, we'll have to defer that one and get back to you on that, or certainly add that to our questions for the next project delivery team meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions from a Daniel Watson. Do you foresee the completed WERP project limiting any traditional use access? And is the reopening of secondary trails in the Big Cypress being considered?
I would say access will be maintained or will not be cut off. We won't. So for traditional use, do you think the WERP project limiting any traditional use? No, I do not. Is reopening secondary trails in Big Cypress being considered? Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And then I have a Stephen Barreto question. So with the removal of the L28 South, will the landowners still be able to use the access of the levee system to access their private camps?
Can you repeat that? Well, let me just before you go back to that before we go to that question, I've got a lifeline here for me. So they let me know that we do have a savings clause that we are that we do have to evaluate, which more or less has to maintain a certain level of flood protection that was established back in when SERP was signed, which was the year 2000. And access is part of that savings clause analysis. So hopefully that helped a little bit on the previous questions. And so what was the last question that you asked me, ma'am?
From Stephen Barretto. It says, so with the removal of the L28 South, will the landowners still be able to use the access of the levee system to access their private camps?
I don't know. I don't know. I think Mindy had mentioned that we are looking into that we are aware of, or that was Looneyville. So if that's the same area, then Mindy answered that question and saying that is something that we are aware of and we are evaluating that.
Steve, this is Mindy.
Hey,
I'll
Mindy.
just add that this one is about L28 South, and I just want to point out that in the L28 South, the levee will remain, most of it, just the tieback part, kind of at the north end, would be removed. So the levee will still be there.
Okay, great. Yeah. Zulamet was echoing your answer there. We're not degrading the L28 South,
Right.
just the tieback, which is up to the north of it. Very northern end.
Okay. Then I have a question from Julio Herrera. If a landowner has a current flow easement, will we be able to renegotiate the flow? I believe it's easement. If they have a current easement, will they be able to renegotiate it?
You know, that's getting a little bit out of my area of expertise there. That's probably a Office of Counsel question. I would think so. I wouldn't think we certainly wouldn't want them to conflict. So I would think so, Mr. Herrera.
All right. Then I have one from an Ozzy Ordom. Would a flow, again with question about flow easement, would a flow easement cause some camp owners to lose access to their properties?
I have to say, I'd have to say no. Now there may be times when there may affect the access. Are there camps out there that are accessed by a motor vehicle as opposed to a swamp buggy? Obviously, if you have a swamp buggy, you're able to traverse some pretty adverse conditions. But if you're driving a car, there may be times where your access would be impacted. I don't know for sure.
All righty. A couple more questions from Jose Ramos. The Miami-Dade Aviation Department is very concerned with impacts and or flooding to the Dade Collier Training and Transient Airport. How or when will we know what impacts may be expected?
I would have to say we will certainly be taking measures not to impact the aviation. again, the savings clause would apply to this particular situation. So if there's a level of flood protection that was established in 2000, that would have to be maintained. And therefore, don't think there would be any impacts to the airport or the training area.
Okay, and I think, whoops, we've got two more that have come through from Steve Barretto. With the removal of the L28 South tieback, will WM allow us to park and or provide us with parking to store and to ride our buggies to camp?
I guess that's water management. Will water management allow us to park in them and or provide us with parking to store and to ride our buggies to camp? Mindy, you want to
Yeah, so
take a stab at that one?
I think this is a level of detail that we haven't gotten to yet. I mean, we're still in planning and how we construct and design any, recreation associated features would come later in our process, but we will take the comment into consideration for sure.
Thanks, Mindy. There's one final question about access as well from a Zach Matai. Will there be an access point established from I-75 for the camp owners in the Miccosukee Reservation after the L28 canal and levee are removed?
Not sure, Zach. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any other access. That's the only access? Then I'd have to say we'd have to definitely look into it, but I'm not sure.
Okay, and those are all the open questions that we had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
So next up is Michael O'Brien to talk about the WERP surveys.
Thank you, Mindy. Hello, everybody. This is Michael O'Brien. I'm the South Florida Water Management District Survey Section Administrator. We're going to go over a presentation here how the survey section assisted the project on obtaining survey information on the ground and on structures, and we call them as a couple phases, phase 1 and phase 2. First of all, I would like to speak out and recognize all the folks that helped us with the survey and the team. It's been mentioned by Steve and Melinda. I'd like to do it again. A lot of the public agencies and the public and private engagement successfully assisted us to gain access to these properties and gain certain areas through areas that had privacy concern on a case-by-case basis. We worked a lot of agencies with the Corps, the Seminole and Miccosukee Tribe, Big Cypress National Preserve, Florida Fish and Wildlife, Jetport Conservation and Recreation Club, and of course, all the area residents and the landowners. On the surveying and mapping team, we had the South Florida Water Management team, the surveying team involved, and also we had a consultant team involved, which was WERP Inc. I just want to make sure that everybody recognizes each other for all the assistance out there, because without all these folks' help, we would never have been able to accomplish all these surveys we did. You can go to the next one. Project need. We needed elevation information specific to those locations or structures is needed to increase certainty about the effects of these properties and to help determine if mitigating measures such as raising homes, wells, or septic tanks and or real estate activities like flow easements are due to increased stage of hydro periods. There's a map on the side. Everybody's seen that already. That's okay. Go ahead, Melinda. Project main goals was determine areas for comparisons with the existing LiDAR. That was working with the team to get the GIS mapping so we could have specific areas to determine for surveys. Collaboration with the stakeholders and agencies and the landowners, and then to perform numerous on-site surveys obtaining elevation data, which we're terming as ground truthing for this project. The methods were basic conventional surveying, boots on the ground, getting elevation surveys via GPS and conventional leveling methods. That information was prepared in informative reports and data sets that supported engineering and real estate analysis. There was a lot of terminology used, such as LiDAR. So I think I'd like to just take a moment to explain a little bit what LiDAR is. Our survey is comparing to the existing LiDAR out there throughout the region. LiDAR is a light detection and ranging system. It's used for remote sensing and determine the surface of the Earth. It's very similar to a better known term as radar. The methods for that LiDAR are airplanes and aerial platforms and sometimes drones. There's some comparative maps here on this slide showing what the LiDAR mapping represents. It basically gives a surface, a topographic surface of the ground. And that LiDAR was one of the main frames for the Corps and the team's analysis to the specific survey areas. Okay, Melinda. What is LiDAR and what is LiDAR comparison to ground truthing? The ground truthing was obtaining survey grade accuracy elevations on the surface of the ground, the roads, the improvements and structures. It was performed utilizing survey grade accuracy, GPS and other methods. Field elevations are compared to the LiDAR, as mentioned in the previous slide, for tolerance and or inclusion and analysis. There's some slides and pictures on the right there. Shows how we collected data points throughout the roads and homes and in the woods, and also pictures of representation of the environment surveyors were working for and out there in various environments. This was unique. It was wet in a lot of areas and quite challenging in some areas. Okay, Melinda. Phase one, we call it phase one, which is the north portion, north of I-75, including Looneyville and also known as the sanctuary. Phase one conditions was rural lands. There was a combination and a mixture of camps, residents, and improved properties. Some of the dense trees and canopy and vegetation caused a lot of problems with their GPS. And we also had to work with occupied and non-occupied private property. There was a lot of concern that we had to work for privacy and secured entry considerations to properties. We worked quite a bit with a lot of agencies in the public and the associations out there to gain access and permissions and coordination to these properties. There was a lot of public notice requirements. We had mailings, we had signs on the roads, we had email blasts from the media agencies to contact the owners, get approval from the owners, and then also organize meeting on the site at the gate to gain access. Phase one's mission was successfully accomplished over a course of 60 days, directly benefiting from the assistance of the Big Cypress National Preserve, the homeowners associations, and the private and landowners and residents. Next is phase two. Phase two is the southern area, phase one continuing. We'll get a little more detail. Phase one, we obtained well over 1,700 elevations. We obtained elevations on a variety of improvements in structures and natural ground. We had minimal owner residence concerns with all the great coordination we had. We completed reports in August of last year, and there were some pictures here of representation of some data points, we will call it, and survey points we obtained throughout the area at specific sites. Some got into some pretty great detail: finished floors, grounds, stairs, improvements, outhouses, any kind of improvement out there that may need some analysis in comparison to the LiDAR. We also went down to chicken coops and animal quarters. So we got quite a bit of detail out there on purpose, not to avoid or misrepresent the parcels that we were challenged to acquire there. We did have some challenges on access and privacy for people, and also we had some wildlife challenges. A unique picture there that we had a bear encounter. Surveyors had to evacuate the area. I think there was some food in that backpack there, and the bear actually knocked over the damaged equipment. So that was, can't say interesting, but to be expected in that area. Okay, Melinda, we go to phase two. Phase two is the southern portion. We call it the Jetport camps in the Tamiami Trail corridor. Again, there was residential and rural lands, and also we had tribal lands and residents incorporated into this project. There was tribal environmentalist sensitive areas that we had to be concerned about and be aware of. Private hunting camps in the Big Cypress National Preserve. And most of this area was swamp and overflow lands, and then included dense trees, canopy, and vegetation, had occupied and non-occupied private property. There was also considerations we had to work through for privacy and secured entry considerations, meeting residents and camp owners and so forth, and to also make sure we gained their permission and coordination to access the properties. This phase also had numerous public notice requirements, letters, email blasts, and so forth with the public and tribe on this particular project. And phase two, again, was the mission was successfully accomplished over the course of 90 days or more, and a direct benefited and assistance from the Seminole and Miccosukee tribes, Florida Fish and Wildlife staff, and the Jetport Conservation and Recreation Club members really had hands-on on completing this phase two. Next one. Well, details on phase two, the Jetports and Tamiami Trail corridor. There was actually, this number is quite low. It's probably more up to 5,000 elevations were collected in this area. Attained elevations of a variety of improvements and features. We had great successful tribe and honey camp stakeholder coordination, and we ended up having minimal owner and resident concerns. Florida Fish and Wildlife and Jetport Conservation Recreational Club members assisted for many weeks out there, providing swamp buggies and collaborations with staff and people and members in escorting us out to the camps. That was wonderful collaboration between the Conservation Club and Florida Fish and Wildlife. And the results of this project was the completion of reports that was provided to the team in October of last year. On the right over there, just some representative sites, some dots and maps where we did get some elevations. There was many more camps out there north of the Miami Airport, Jetport there. We had to work on a selected group, and then also along Tamiami Trail. We had to work on a selected group of residences because for time constraints and mostly budget constraints to get a best representation to the real estate analysis group and the team. Okay. This is a few pictures that we obtained out there on the Jetport camps north of the airport. We have our drone out there, and it just kind of gives a great representation. You folks are on here, a lot of I'm sure camps owners or users, you know the area well, but to me it was quite interesting. To our survey group, it was quite challenging. We had several buggies that helped us out there, and without that effort for Fish and Wildlife and the conservation group and the district, we wouldn't have gained access. One thing I learned is going out there blind without having an escort, we probably would have got lost quite a bit too. So that was really great from the group helping us gain access to those camps. Okay, you can go to the next one. This is coming to the final slide. There's a video coming up here that our drone imagery of the camps. You may have to adjust your volume, please.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'll go ahead and continue on. I apologize that streaming this video obviously has become a challenge. And this is going to wrap up to the next slide. And I would like to just, again, thank you all the agencies, Fish and Wildlife, the Conservation Club, for we obtained thousands and thousands of elevations out there on the ground and on structures that is going to assist the whole team for their review, their LiDAR analysis, and their real estate analysis. You can go to the next slide there. I'm open to any questions from here. Thank you.
Jennifer, do we have any questions?
No, the only open question at the moment is asking generally, will the recorded presentation be available for viewing later? And I confirmed with Devon that yes, it will be. It'll be available on YouTube right after this meeting on FFWMD TV. And then tomorrow we should have a link that we can provide to attendees if they're interested.
Great, thank you very much.
That's currently the only question.
All right. Our next presenter, in addition to the WERP feasibility study that we've been talking about, that's led by the Army Corps of Engineers, the district is separately looking at existing conditions within the Tamiami Trail Loop Road area and what it might take to move forward early with some of the WERP features, particularly the 3 culverts on the L28 south, and what it would take to move forward with those in the area to address existing conditions. So with that, I'll introduce Madahel Ansar. Madahel, are you going to share your screen?
Yes, I can. See that on my screen, I think. Give me a second.
Sure.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, I'll go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Madahel Ansar. I lead the Applied Hydraulics section of the South Florida Water Management District. And I'll talk to you about the project that Linda Perez just introduced, essentially looking at accelerating some of the feature of Western Everglades Restoration Project. Before I get into specifically what we're looking at, just a reminder of some of the problem area for L28. Again, this is a very small subcomponent of a broader project that was presented to you earlier today. So in this L28 area, some of the issue revolve around high water in 3A. Every time we have very high rain, you'll have water basically moving from this pocket area between 11 Mile Road and L28 South, and it goes through that degraded tieback levee. In addition to that, the gates, the outflow structure from 3A, most of the year are closed because of a sparrow constraint, S344, 343A, 343B, S12s, primarily, again, because of that constraint. believe sometime between October to July, we basically have them closed. Because of that constraint, water will pile up in 3A and then essentially end up with way too much water in 3A. This area will be way too wet. At times, the Sparrow area may be too wet as well. And then some of the CNSF canals will result in basically diverting water from some of the natural flowways between Tamiami Trail and Loop Road. You'll have at times water stacking up against 11 Mile Road, leading to too dry condition west of 11 Mile Road. This is just a picture of what 3A will look like during high water. In an idealized scenario, you'll have flow basically coming between 11 Mile Road and S12A and not negatively impacting some of those camps and Jetport area, and then still keep the Sparrow here area dry and restore some of the natural flowways in Big Cypress. So what we were asked to look at essentially is what would it take to go ahead and design and construct these 3 culverts that were mentioned earlier. Those 3 culverts, again, are proposed in the existing L28 South levee. Yes, the levee is staying. And those culverts are such that there is 1 north of S344 and 2 are south of S344. And once we put them in, you're looking at a design flow of 1,000 CFS. And just to be clear, the 1,000 CFS is a design number. Doesn't mean they're always passing 1,000 CFS, but they were to be sized to handle 1,000 CFS. So once you put them in, obviously you're bringing a lot more water in this pocket area. What does that mean for the downstream interests, particularly some of the potential flow impediment, meaning US 41 and Loop Road? What changes do we need to make there? What kind of culvert do we need to install and what size? So that's kind of what we were looking at. Just like I said, it's more just assessing what would it take to put in those 3 culverts as a first step of this Western Everglades restoration project. So to that effect, we did a field reconnaissance trip earlier this year to Loop Road, essentially gone from S12A, drove all along Loop Road, and then made our way through this loop, and then came back to Tamiami Trail. And on another day, we also look at 11 Mile Road as well. And the intent of that work was really assess the existing culverts. How many do we have out there? In what shape are they? Do we need to survey them? What do we need to do with them as far as any future analysis that will help us understand what is the impact of adding these 3 culverts? We brought in a stream gauging group. Stream gauging essentially is to measure flows, get an actual measurement of how much water those structures are moving. We did some structure inspection as well. We assessed survey need, and we assessed some area of potential road overtopping. And I'll summarize that in the next few slides. For road overtopping, again, this was early January this year. We saw some overtopping near Loop Road itself, east and west of that, Loop 1, east and west of that structure. We didn't see any overtopping at Loop 2, but we do know just from data analysis there are times where Loop 2 will overtop. And then we went ahead and measured flow at about 4 or 5, some of the major passages for flow, we measured flow. These are just some of the picture of that work. And what that entails essentially is you have an acoustic device mounted on a small tether boat, and then it's measuring how fast the water is moving. From that, we are able to get an estimate of how much flow those culverts are passing. Granted, this was dry season, we're getting flows really small, 20 to 40 CFS range. I think the highest we measured was about 44 CFS or so. What that tells us again is these culverts, even though we saw many of them out there, they don't really have a whole lot of capacity, meaning when we have high discharges, high rainfall, we're going to have to increase the capacity through those road. Otherwise, we're going to have some even more overtopping than we have today. The other issue also we saw is there is really very limited head across the culvert, meaning the water level in front of the culvert and behind the culverts are very close to each other. When you have that, you almost have like one big pool of water and you don't have a whole lot of flow going through them. We also went to 11 Mile Road. This is the road up here, essentially going up to an oil rig at this location. Sobsak from Big Cypress took us around and showed us. It was really helpful. Thank you, Bob, for doing that. And we were able to see that this road had about 125 culverts ranging in size from 12 to 24 inches. A big chunk of them are in really bad shape. They're old and failing. 16% of them are relatively new. I have a picture of some of those newer ones. In sizes, they range from 18 to 24 inch. The other thing we saw also is just how they flow vary depending on where you are on that 11-mile road. The first 8 miles from US 41, the flow is essentially from east to west. And then as you go up, at a certain point, it shifts and it goes from west to east. And we also had discussed this with Sobsak and others. There was some overtopping of this first 11 to 2 miles in 2020, suggesting again this road has limited conveyance as far as pushing water from the east to the west part of Big Cypress. We also look at the degraded, the tieback levee itself, even though the whole western tieback levee is going to get degraded. There are portions of it today that are already degraded. And those portions obviously will impact the movement of water as you bring in that water from north. And you potentially can have an effect on what we're doing with this culvert. So we look at those degraded tieback levee portion, realizing that we're going to have to come back and survey them as well and model them as far as the actual flow of water to ultimately get to what we're really trying to answer, which is once we put in these 3 culverts, what other remedial measure do we need downstream to make sure hydraulically we are not negatively impacting something. To summarize, as far as the work completed to date, we have developed preliminary sizing of the proposed culverts. We have obtained preliminary construction cost estimate for these 3 culverts. We also completed the site reconnaissance trip I just discussed, obtained some field measurement, which were very valuable because they gave us a really good sense of capacity-wise what we are looking at and what's out there today and what we may need to add. We did a limited culvert inspection. We had a GoPro camera, send it through some of this culvert. We didn't see particularly any blockage per se, which is a good news. Most of the culvert that we inspected were in good shape. And then we also assessed the survey need. Again, that survey, I want to be clear, is different than the survey that Mike just discussed so far. This survey is really meant to support the hydraulic analysis, meaning it's a survey focusing on the infrastructure itself, looking at how many culverts we have out there, what are their sizes, what are the invert elevation, anything that this culvert may have that may impact their ability to push water through is what that survey is about. So we are investigating essentially what is needed at this point to mitigate any potential impact of those proposed culverts. To that effect, we are collaborating with the Corps and got the model that they have for that area. It's a broader model for the bigger WERP project, but we believe that model can be modified and fitted to our need, answering the specific localized question that are being asked of us. That's my presentation. I don't know if you have any question for me at this time.
Thank you. We have one question that's come through. It says, will the 3 culverts continue to divert water westward even when water levels are dropping in WCA 3A South? Could this possibly lead to more low water closures in 3A North at times like right now when it's very dry and close to hitting the closure criteria? Or will the culverts be at an elevation to only help during high water events in 3A South?
Great question. Thank you for that question. Yeah, this culvert, first of all, they will be sized to move 1,000 CFS, I mentioned total, but they will also be gated. So we'll have the option to modulate the discharges through them. Obviously, when 3A is low, in all likelihood, they'll be closed. They will have to follow whatever water control plan is in place. Today, we have a COP, so it has to go in line with the water control plan. We're not going to be deviating from that. So if the water levels are low in 3A, obviously we'll be shutting those gates. So they will be gated culvert. They would not be just open-ended culverts. Great question.
Okay, and then I have another question from M. Taylor. Have the culverts under US 41 been considered in the WERP investigation? And if so, in what capacity?
Yes, we are looking at the culvert under US 41. Obviously, those are part of a pathway, the flowway, if you want to call it, that this water is going to take. We did look at them, and we will be looking at them further as far as not only surveying them, but also potentially doing the hydraulic analysis as well. Yes, that will be part of the analysis.
Thank you. I have another question from Scott Loans. All last fall and winter, water was taken from Western Everglades and pushed east, which isn't the normal flow pattern. Was that considered in your flow rate numbers?
Okay, so the flow rate number I have is just an actual measurement, meaning what we just measure what's out there. As far as moving water east versus west, it really comes down to the water control plan that's in place. Cobb went through a lot of discussions and evaluation from different stakeholders. Yes, there may be some opposition to some pieces that are in Cobb, but it's the water control plan that we have in place. So that's what was followed. If it resulted in more water to the east, that's probably some of the intent of Cobb is to move more water to east. Would Western Everglades Restoration Project change that? Possibly. I think it's too early to tell. Certainly, if we put in those culverts west, chances are you're going to have some water going west now, but is that really robbing east and sending it west? Even that question is still too early because we are building reservoir north. A2 reservoir is under design and construction. So I think that if this project move forward as conceived, you're going to see more water going west. Does not necessarily mean it's robbing the east either. It just means we have the ability to bring in more water south from Lake O.
Madahel, in the interest of time, I'd like to allow folks the opportunity to speak and provide public comment or ask their questions out loud. So if you could stop sharing for a moment, I'll put up the public comment slide that shows the instructions, and then we can take the rest of the questions that way. All right. So if you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand using the raise hand feature you should have on the toolbar from Zoom. If you called in, you'll want to push *9 to raise your hand. And then once you're called, you'll push *6 to unmute yourself. So do we have anyone who'd like to ask a question or speak, make public comments? No, nobody?
Hi, Mindy, it's Jennifer. I'm unfamiliar with this, so give me one moment. I see 3 hands raised,
Okay.
and I'm assuming I just click on the individual's name.
Give it a shot.
Okay. Actually, Devon says I just have to say their name. Is it Yogesh Kher is the first one that has their hand raised, and they need to unmute their microphone.
Hi, this is Yogesh Kher. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead. Yes, thank you. You can speak.
Okay, so this is Yogesh Kher from the Everglades Foundation. I would like to thank the entire team for today's presentation. It was very informative. We are really excited to see WERP moving forward and progress being made. I just had that comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have a Mike Elfenbein on the line as well.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi, guys. First, let me say thank you to everybody, all of you from all of the agencies for the last year's worth of consideration, collaboration, and all the other stuff that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Much appreciated. I know that a lot of the stakeholders feel good about the way we're going and the communication we're having. So I look forward to that being possible throughout this entire process. That said, in the essence of time, there's a couple notes I took here. So you had several questions from several people, and you've had them from me in the past, and I know we've had these conversations as far as access and what that would look like. So I think something that might help answer that question is, can Matahel go back to the slide that he had with the button bush in the background? Is that possible?
You let me know when I get there.
Okay.
Did I miss it?
No, I haven't seen it yet. Keep going. No, I don't see it. At any rate, I thought it might help you if you find it. The L28 South, the proposal is essentially to remove the levee from the entrance at the Tamiami Trail to where it makes the turn and goes to the north. The proposal is to put 3 structures north of that to regulate water flow from east to west. How do the agencies propose to access those structures for operation and maintenance?
Mike,
Yeah.
just to clarify, the levee on the L28 South is not going to be removed. Only the tieback, the
So
very
that's why I was
northern.
looking for that slide. If you look at that slide, there,
It's my second
Any
slide.
raise?
Second or third, yeah.
Yeah.
no,
So
Keep going. Keep going.
there it is. There you go. Perfect.
That's it, yeah.
Yep. Nope. There it is. Nope.
is this the right one? Or is it the next one?
I think so.
Okay.
That'll work. But if you zoom in down there at the bottom of the levee, right? Can you do that? Yeah, right there. Can you zoom into that?
I can try.
No, I don't think.
Okay, so from there back to the south and east, there's not going to be a levee, or there is going to be a levee?
So whatever levee is there right now will remain.
Okay.
This is
Then
a block. This is a block on the canal. It's just an exaggerated for graphical purposes.
So then from there all the way north, the canal and the levee will continue to exist.
The canal will be backfilled. The levee
Yes.
will stay.
Okay. And then when we get back to the tieback, the levee and the canal will no longer exist. But will there still be an earthen trail that's traversable by a 4-wheel drive vehicle from there to where the tieback currently ends?
Yes.
And that trail will be accessible by people who traditionally used it to access their camps in that portion of the preserve, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, correct, yes.
And it wouldn't be impossible as we move forward with planning that where the tieback would be completely removed at the end of the L28 South levee, that an extra piece of dirt might be laid out where someone might be able to turn around or park a couple of vehicles, right? That's not an impossibility.
Not an impossibility, no.
No.
Great, but that's something that we would have to work out as we continue to progress with the planning of this project, right?
Right.
Correct.
Awesome. So then if you zoom out of that to its original form, I don't think the L28 Interceptor is up there, but for folks who have camps in the Miccosukee area, yeah, I don't think that's on there, but one of the other slides had it. But for folks who had camps in the Miccosukee area who are traditionally letting their buggies or airboats off at the end of the L28 Interceptor which is known, I think, as Sand Lake or Sand Point, sorry. Would there still be a trail there for someone to drive a trailer behind a truck to? Or would the purpose of that to be to allow it to restore to its natural landscape?
That one is a little bit less clear at this point, Mike. So there's the levee on the interceptor. It's planned to be degraded to a certain point north of I-75. So there would not be a trail from the current access point off of I-75. There would have to be, you'd have to use a different route.
Will it be possible to consider having some kind of access point where you would have like what you have off of 75 now in the addition lands, where there's a roadside access with a parking lot and a gate? Is that being considered, or can it be implemented in this project as we move forward?
Where sorry, Mike, I'm not
So at
catching
I-75,
exactly where you are.
well, so it's not on that map, but, or I guess it is, but it's in the little square to the top left. But the L28 interceptor comes down from 75 on an angle. You're going to degrade the levee and fill the canal. So the L28 interceptor won't exist. Yes, correct, right there. But people use the L28 interceptor to access Miccosukee tribal lands that they lease, their camp leases are on. And some people use that to access Conservation Area 3. So clearly there won't be a road that goes to the terminus of the L28 interceptor anymore. But can we continue to ensure that there's access from that point at I-75? So while it might be an inconvenience to some to not have the levee there anymore, at least they can continue to offload their airboats and off-road vehicles at the same place that they've done so traditionally for the last several decades.
We're certainly could look at that.
Yeah, so like if we can make sure that that's being worked towards now at inception, and that people can feel comfortable knowing that you guys are addressing that, I think that might alleviate any, concerns. And the same to be said for Looneyville, which I heard was also asked earlier today. And I know you said that you were looking into it, but just something for consideration. Seems to be a lot of concern from people, and certainly if you guys can address it or let us know that it's being addressed, it would be better.
Yeah, Mindy, this is Jennifer Leeds, so maybe I can just chime in really quickly on that. So on all CERT projects, right, we like to make sure that we can provide, public access to areas. And so, yeah, Mike, we're certainly open to working with the folks out there to be able to see, what can we do that will be compatible with the project to still allow them to have access to where they need to be.
Okay. I just as long as everybody who's listening understands that, that's all.
Yeah. And so we're still early on in the project, and, we definitely intend to keep these lines of communication open with everyone. And we will definitely work with folks to talk about where their concerns are, where they've had traditional access, and, what can be done to ensure that we, provide that, and it's also compatible with the project.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. As always, spot on. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. We have another hand raised, just one more from a Daniel Watson.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I just want to thank everyone for the presentations and all the staff. I know there's loads of work going on behind the scenes and frustrations that we don't really hear about. And I do appreciate the hard work. Some of the questions come from folks that just don't understand how hard it is. And I do want to thank Mike Elfenbein for kind of being the string between the cups for a lot of stakeholders and sportsmen and agencies to be able to communicate openly and make sure that all the concerns are being heard. And, you know, every once in a while we even come up with a good idea. So I appreciate him. The first question that I asked, and it was answered, I appreciate it, Mindy, was on some of the key species that we chose to use for this presentation. And while these animals are species in the Everglades, I just found it a little odd to use alligators, which their populations are doing fine, and they are able to pretty much live anywhere in the Everglades. There's plenty of alligators. There was the wood stork that was chosen, and the map showed, you know, just as much green benefit as there was orange detriment to their habitat. And then in between those two was the Cape sable sparrow, which has been kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of these meetings. That's been the cause of a lot of these backups north of Tamiami Trail, and it almost seems like a majority of the reason that we're looking at putting these 3 culverts in and doing surveys and flow measurement and looking at the cost of construction because of the water that's held up by the Cape sable sparrow. Not to say that any of that is not great to see a workaround as far as getting water moved out of 3A South during high water events, and I was happy to hear that they're gated. I just would like to see maybe some panther and deer and bear surveys, some of the other key species that maybe a lot of the stakeholders are interested in seeing the benefit and detriment when being provided the information for the WERP project. And to close out, I just wanted to express again concern over, when I said traditional access, I mean just recreational vehicles. We have airboat access, but buggy access and access to camps. I'd hope that WERP doesn't eliminate some of that access that we try so hard to maintain. And even like the airstrips I touched on, I know it's still early on, but some of these camps can be raised, the airstrips can't, and that's how some people do access their private land out there. And I didn't hear anything about prescribed fires. I know it's been really tough, and it's important out there in the big cybers to get prescribed fires going, but with the higher water levels during wet season and the prolonged water levels, I hope it doesn't have any ill effect on any prescribed burning out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mindy, I don't see any other hands raised.
All right. We certainly have gotten the message. We will definitely be looking at access and recreational access as we move forward in the project. I'll give a couple more minutes here to or seconds here to see if anybody has any final words. But I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in today and taking the time to listen to our story about WERP. And as Steve said, we're getting the plan and the team back up and running, and we'll be looking to move forward with the study and have hopefully many more opportunities to talk to you about WERP and give you a more complete description of what it is and where the effects will be. I think I see a hand raised.
You do, Mr. Robert Wiley.
Yes, good presentation. Thank you for it. I had asked a question, but I don't know if you're reading questions, so I wanted to speak and bring the question up to everybody's attention. In the discussion on the flow at Loop Road, is the intention after WERP is in place for Loop Road to be dry, or are you still going to plan on some annual inundation during the summertime? Because right now it goes underwater frequently. I don't know, were you trying to just minimize it, or are you going to try to make it dry And I asked this question from Collier County's perspective on the road maintenance, so we know what to be expecting.
Yeah, thank you for that question. For WERP purposes, we're looking to make sure that the project doesn't cause any additional problems for the road, but that with the additional culverts that WERP was proposing, it may provide some relief to that, depending on the timing of that of those events.
Okay, I was just curious because, like I say, right now the road is inundated during the peak of the wet season, and was that the intent to let that continue to happen, or were the culverts throughout the length of Loop Road going to be upsized enough so that it stayed dry and elevating even the road of Loop Road itself, you know, road elevation? I just didn't know what all was going to be involved in here.
Maybe I can take a stab at that. So the culverts on Loop Road, right now they are managed and operated by a different entity depending on where you are. Some of them are under jurisdiction of Big Cypress, some of them are under jurisdiction of DOT. Yes, we do see some overtopping of the road near Loop 1. Some years, doesn't happen every single year, but some years it does happen. The intent for us, is, like Mindy said, is not to make things worse. Essentially, at a minimum, keep the status quo. Having said that, during discussion and deliberation as we get into the TSP, certainly that issue may come up. Ultimately, decision may be made to just keep them whole or improve whatever level of flood control they have today. So that issue is still remain to be sorted out as far as the end result. But certainly we are going into it with the understanding that we cannot make it any worse than it is today, meaning if they're experiencing certain inundation, we have to keep it at that or something better.
Thank you, Madahel. I see some more hands.
We have Tom Forsyth has his hand raised.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. This is Tom Forsyth, superintendent here at Big Cypress, and just a sort of a generic answer to Mr. Wiley's question from my perspective. We're in conversations with multiple agencies to include the Army Corps of Engineers regarding Loop Road. And I would say that the best answer I can give right now is that the intention isn't to keep it dry or lessen the impact or not lessen the impact. The objective is to create opportunity for the water to behave the way it wants to behave. So that means it's going to take more culverts. We have opportunity. We know that you can stand on the road almost at any point in time, not right now while it's dry, but almost any other time. And if you look to the north of the road, you see backed up water, and you look south of the road of the culvert, it's coming out like white water. So we know there's too much head pressure inside the loop and that the water is trying to get south of the loop. So our effort right now is just to try to increase the capacity. I don't know, much like we don't know if WERP as a whole in the project we know it's going to change the way water flows, but I don't know that we have good answers on, will it be an inch higher or 2 inches higher, or will it be an inch a month longer or shorter? So the goal right now for me is to try to get the culverts to have more capacity so that the water can behave in its more natural state in the sheet flow, so that the water can get where it wants to get to. I think the byproduct would be that there would be less overtopping of the roads, but that's just a barely educated guess at this point.
Thank you, Tom.
We have Jennifer Reynolds' hand raised. No. How about Scott Mullins? Mr. Loans, if you're trying to speak, you're still muted.
Hey,
There.
can y'all hear me now?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for allowing the public and the stakeholders to chime in on these meetings. And I just wanted to kind of follow up what Mike Elfenbein said is, in the planning process of these projects is to keep the stakeholders in the loop, and to also just to keep allowing the traditional access points, maybe not in the same way as they were, but include them, in your construction and your design so that Glades can still have access to these areas as they traditionally do. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mindy, I don't see any other hands raised.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We've gone over our time, but we definitely want to make sure that everybody had a chance to speak if they wanted to, and to ask their questions. And we've got a lot of good questions, a lot of things that we need to do our homework on. And we look forward to working with you all in the future. So with that, I'll conclude the meeting, and I hope you all have a good evening, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mindy. Good job.
Thank you, Mindy.
Thanks for my panelists. Thank you all for being here today and presenting. And Jennifer Ayton, thank you. And of course, Devin, we couldn't pull this off without magic IT support. So really appreciate it.